Forensic investigations have many moving parts, but not all of those are in the lab. Forensic accounting can be an important tool in the whole process. Joining us now is Jim Cali, NFSTC board member and certified public accountant, to share his experience and insight in the field. Mr. Cali, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Mr. Cali, what is a forensic accountant's role in the investigative process?
Well, let's start with a combination of the words, forensic plus accounting. As you know, forensic means relating to the use of science or technology in the investigation and the establishment of facts of evidence for use in a court of law. So if you take that and you add that to the definition of accounting, which is the bookkeeping and other methods involved in making financial records of a business transaction. So if you add accounting to forensic, you have forensic accounting, which is a specialty practice of accounting that requires knowledge of accounting, auditing, and the requirements for the rules of law to present evidence in a courtroom or an arbitration, a deposition, so that the finder of facts can understand the business process that was involved.
You mentioned the internal audit. So what is the difference between that and a forensic examination?
That's a very good question. And to answer that question, I'm going to use a very interesting example. Think of spaghetti. When you're doing an audit, you take a sample of transactions and you test them. So that's like digging into a plate of spaghetti and rolling up an amount and eating it. When you're doing a forensic examination, you have to look at every single transaction in order to identify which ones are the corrupt transactions from the legitimate business transactions. Auditors use sampling techniques where they will take a percentage of the business transactions, they'll look at those transactions, and then they'll make an inference about the entire population of transactions. Where forensic accounting investigations, you must look at each and every transaction involved. For a forensic accountant, the level of knowledge is much higher than just for an accountant or an auditor, because as a forensic accountant, you have to know the rules of accounting that created the business transaction, the methods of conducting an audit, plus the investigative techniques of taking all of that information and wrapping it up in such a fashion that you can present it to a prosecutor to bring the charges against the individual for the financial transactions.
So how did you get started in the field?
I was the internal auditor for the city of Fort Lauderdale. And at that point in time, 1983, a long time ago, there were some financial cases that were being investigated by our detective bureau. And the chief of police at that time said, you know, we really don't understand what's going on in this business transaction. So let's see if we can talk with someone downtown. So I got the phone call to go out and work with the detectives to try to decipher what was going on in this financial case that they were working on. And that's when the chief saw the value of looking at the financial transactions of a criminal enterprise. So not only could we put that business out of business, but then we can use that information to do the asset forfeiture of the assets that were obtained from the proceeds of the ongoing criminal enterprise. So it was kind of like an accident, if you will, that I kind of got involved with the folks at the Fort Lauderdale Police Department, and that's what began my career in forensic accounting. From that case, we worked on many other cases, and I was assigned to work on a number of task forces with other law enforcement agencies. And then when I left the police department and went over to the Broward County Sheriff's Office, that's when I was put in the technical unit and worked with the Strategic Investigations Bureau and became their forensic accountant on all of their financial cases. And through our work in forensic accounting with the folks that I work with at the Sheriff's Office and doing analysis with Financial Crimes Enforcement Network Information, FinCEN, we actually solved the cold case murder.
That's really interesting. So how did your casework help solve this crime?
Well, we were working on a large scale drug smuggling program where drugs were coming into the United States from Jamaica. And there were a number of Jamaican nationals that were in the United States that were part of this enterprise. And one of them, Mr. Kingston, that was his name, was involved in a murder in Broward County. And he fled after it was a drug deal that had gone bad. And after he murdered the individual, he fled and we couldn't find him for a number of years. So then this new case came up with a different group. And we had Mr. Kingston's social security number from a previous employment that he had while he was in Broward County. So we used that social security number and we requested a FinCEN run against that social security number and the social security numbers of the other suspects in the drug investigation. And lo and behold, we found an individual in Arizona by the last name of King using the same social security number that Mr. Kingston was using in Broward County. So we sent one of our detectives out there to find Mr. King, and lo and behold, Mr. King was in fact Mr. Kingston that was wanted for the murder in Broward County. So that's how we apprehended him.
In forensic science, they say every contact leaves a trace, and it's the same in forensic accounting, right?
You know, when you look at forensic sciences, they use fingerprints and ballistic data in order to make the case. Well, same thing with forensic accounting. Certain financial transactions have a fingerprint, if you will, because you can't change the financial transaction once it takes place. So it's following the trail of those financial transactions, like analyzing, fingerprint and information in order to get the evidence to prove the crime.
So we know, Mr. Cali, that you accidentally fell into this field, but how does someone actually become a forensic accountant?
There aren't many opportunities in most colleges and universities for someone to get a degree in forensic accounting. There are a few programs that offer an advanced degree or a master's in forensic accounting, but really you must go through the steps to get your undergrad in accounting, maybe a master's in accounting or taxation or forensic accounting or auditing. But you really need to have experience doing accounting, preparing financial statements, so you get that background, and then move to the next level to do audits, to dissect financial statements, understand the transactions that are related to it and how they come together, so that then you can begin doing the investigative accounting work in the forensic accounting role. A lot of forensic accounting today is involved in the world of insurance claims. That's probably the biggest use of forensic accountants right now for business interruption claims and claims of damages, of lost wages, lost profits, things like that. And another part of it that is beginning to get a lot of traction and a lot of growth is in wrongful death and personal injury claims, where forensic accountants work with medical professionals to try to determine the dollar value of because of a loss that has been suffered, either a premature death or loss of a body part, an arm, a leg, an eye. So now your economic value has been diminished because of this loss of a body part or death. And so what is that really worth? So a lot of growth in that area of working with medical professionals to determine the economic value lost to that individual so that they can make the claim.
Other than law enforcement, what other agencies are using forensic accountants in their cases?
A lot of small local law enforcement agencies don't have the resources to bring a forensic accountant on board, so they work with task forces with large regional, state police, county sheriff's office, and the federal law enforcement agencies. It's kind of interesting, you wouldn't think of, but some of the best forensic accountants are not in the FBI. That always comes to pass as the number one law enforcement agency with forensic accountants, but most of them are in ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, and the USDA, U.S. Department of Agriculture. U.S. Department of Agriculture is involved with food stamps, the distribution of food stamps. So there's been a lot of fraud in food stamps. So that's why they have a lot of forensic accountants out to root out the fraud, waste, and abuse in food stamps. And in ATF, they have some of the best and have put together some of the best cases in forensic accounting, because they're responsible for the collection of excise taxes on the sale of alcohol and tobacco products. So there's a lot of contraband and a lot of smuggling of tobacco products across state lines to avoid the payment of taxes in certain states where it's high. So they buy the tobacco products in a low tax state and sell them in a high tax state. And so there's a lot of forensic accounting to root out that kind of fraud.
Mr. Cali, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you being here with us.
My pleasure.